The late afternoon sun had been deceptive. Emma had left the coffee shop on Market Street feeling confident in her decision to walk instead of drive, her canvas messenger bag slung across her shoulder. Riverside in October could be unpredictable, but the forecast had promised clear skies. The first drops hit her somewhere between the vintage clothing stores and the old Mission Inn district. She'd been exploring, getting lost deliberately, trying to clear her head after another suffocating week at the dental office. 26 years old, and she felt 40, trapped in a life that looked perfect on paper, but felt like slow suffocation. Within seconds, the sky opened up with biblical fury. The rain came down in sheets, turning the cracked sidewalks into rivers. Emma's sundress, a light yellow thing she'd worn to feel pretty, plastered itself to her body. Her sandals squelched uselessly as she ran, mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. She wasn't in the nice part of Riverside anymore. Somewhere in her wandering, she'd crossed into a neighborhood where houses hunched closer together, where chain-link fences guarded small yards filled with automotive graveyards. The air smelled different here, motor oil and mowed grass and something industrial. Thunder cracked overhead, so close she felt it in her chest. Emma ran faster, searching desperately for shelter. The businesses on this street were the kind with bars on the windows, a liquor store with Spanish signage, a check cashing place, a shuttered laundromat. Nothing open, nothing welcoming. Then she saw it. A garage. Door rolled halfway up, spilling yellow light onto the flooded driveway. No thought, just instinct. Emma ducked under the half-open door and stumbled into the dry space beyond, gasping, dripping, her heart hammering. The first thing that hit her was the smell. Motor oil, leather, gasoline, cigarette smoke, and underneath it all, something masculine and indefinable that made her animal brain sit up and take notice. The second thing was the silence. Her breathing sounded too loud in the space. The rain outside became a distant roar. The third thing was him. He stood near the back of the garage, half in shadow, next to a Harley Davidson that gleamed even in the dim light. For a frozen moment they stared at each other. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black vest over a white t-shirt. The vest made her stomach drop. The patches covered it, the most prominent one a red and white winged skull. The words, Hell's Angels, arched above it. California below. Emma had lived in California her whole life. She knew what that patch meant. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with eyes so dark they were almost black. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw covered in dark stubble, prominent cheekbones, a nose that looked like it had been broken at least once. Tattoos covered both arms in elaborate sleeves. His hair was dark and longer, pulled back into a low knot with a few strands framing his face. Grease on his hands, black crescents under his fingernails. Mid-30s, maybe older. The kind of older that came with experience, with stories, with a life lived outside Emma's comfortable boundaries. I'm sorry, she managed, her voice small. I didn't. The rain, I'll go. But she didn't move. Couldn't. Because he was looking at her in a way that no one had ever looked at her before. It wasn't just desire, though, that was there, burning in his eyes as they traveled from her face down to her feet and back up. She was acutely aware of how the wet dress clung to every curve, how vulnerable she looked. But there was something else in his gaze. Recognition. And underneath that, something almost protective. Storm caught you, he said finally. His voice was deep, rough. A statement, not a question. Yeah. Emma's teeth wanted to chatter. I was walking and it just... You're not from around here. He shifted his weight, crossing his arms. Emma forced herself to keep her eyes on his face. No, I mean, I'm from Riverside, but not this part. I was just exploring. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Exploring. He repeated the word like it was foreign. Thunder boomed overhead, making her jump. Outside, the rain intensified. You can't go out in that, he said. Not a suggestion, just a fact. You'll get hit by lightning or swept into a flood drain. I'll be fine. No, he said simply. You won't. He turned back to the motorcycle, picked up a wrench and bent over the engine, dismissing her apparently. She stood there, water dripping, forming a puddle around her feet. The garage wasn't large, maybe 20 feet deep and 15 wide. The motorcycle took center space, chrome gleaming. Tool benches lined one wall, organized with surprising precision. The other wall held shelves stacked with parts and boxes. A mini fridge hummed in one corner. Next to it, a beat-up couch covered in a worn blanket. The back wall was decorated with vintage motorcycle advertisements and a metal sign that read, "If you can read this, the bitch fell off." Despite everything, despite the danger signals, there was something almost cozy about the space. This wasn't just a garage. This was someone's sanctuary. Emma hugged her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt. Her dress was plastered to her body, practically transparent. She could feel his eyes on her even though he was supposedly focused on the motorcycle. Could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical thing traveling over her skin, leaving heat in its wake despite the cooling effect of her wet clothes. "There's a towel," he said without looking up, gesturing vaguely toward the couch. "Clean one. Top shelf." Emma hesitated, then moved toward the shelf he'd indicated. Her sandals made wet slapping sounds on the concrete, embarrassingly loud. She found the towel, gray, worn soft from many washings, folded neatly, and pulled it down. It smelled like laundry detergent, clean and fresh, incongruous with the garage's grease and gasoline atmosphere. She started drying her arms, her face, wringing water from her hair. The towel soaked through quickly, but it felt good to do something, to have a purpose beyond standing there dripping and trying not to stare at him. "What's your name?" His voice startled her. He still hadn't looked up from the motorcycle, his hands working with practiced efficiency, adjusting something in the engine that she couldn't see. "Emma." She paused, then asked the question, even though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Yours?" "Jax." Of course it was. Of course he had a name like Jax, sharp and hard and vaguely dangerous. Probably not the name his mother gave him, but the one he'd earned or chosen in this life he led. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, "for letting me stay until the rain stops." He made a non-committal sound, something between acknowledgement and dismissal. His hands paused on the wrench, and finally, he looked up at her again, really looked at her. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach flip, made her forget how to breathe properly. "You scared?" he asked. Direct. No cushioning. Emma considered lying, considered giving him the answer that would make her seem braver, stronger, more worldly than she was. But something about the way he looked at her, the way he seemed to see straight through every defense she'd ever built, made honesty the only option. "A little," she admitted. He nodded slowly, like this was the right answer, the smart answer. "Good. You should be. Girl like you wandering into this neighborhood, into this garage." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The implications hung in the air between them, heavy and unignorable. "Girl like me," Emma repeated, something stirring in her chest. Not quite anger, but close. "What kind of girl is that?" His eyes traveled over her again, and this time there was no mistaking the heat in them. "The kind that doesn't know how to find trouble," he said softly, "but finds it anyway." The rain hammered on. Lightning flashed, visible through the gap where the garage door was still rolled halfway up, illuminating the space in brief, stark white clarity before plunging it back into yellow-tinted shadow. Emma counted the seconds until thunder followed. 1, 2, 3, and then the boom shook the walls. 3 miles away, the storm was right on top of them. Jack set down the wrench and straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that made them greasier rather than cleaner. He was even taller, standing at full height, probably 6'2" or 6'3", broad in a way that came from actual work, from lifting heavy things and doing hard labor, not from gym mirrors and protein shakes. "You got someone who knows where you are?" he asked. The question surprised her. Emma shook her head. "No, I mean, I live alone. My roommate moved out last month and I haven't—" She stopped herself. Why was she telling him this? Why was she volunteering information about how isolated she was, how no one would know if she disappeared? But Jax just nodded, his expression unreadable. "You got a phone?" Emma felt for her messenger bag, relieved to find it still there, still somewhat protected from the rain by her body. She pulled out her phone, the case wet but the screen still working. "Yeah, good. Call someone. Let them know you're safe, waiting out the storm." It was such a reasonable request, such a normal thing to suggest that it almost made her laugh. Here she was sheltering in a Hells Angels garage, and he was concerned about her making safety check-ins. "I don't," Emma started, then stopped. The truth was she didn't have anyone to call. Her mother would panic and ask 1,000 questions. Her friends from high school had drifted away into marriages and babies and lives Emma didn't quite fit into anymore. The girls from work were friendly, but not friends, not really. There's no one expecting me. Something flickered across Jax's face. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Like he knew exactly what that kind of isolation felt like. Had lived in it himself. All right, he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, loaded with things neither of them were saying. Emma was hyper-aware of everything. The way her wet dress clung to her thighs. The way his eyes kept drifting down before forcing themselves back to her face. The way her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The garage felt smaller suddenly. The air thicker, charged with more than just the electricity from the storm outside. This was dangerous. Not because he'd done anything threatening. He hadn't moved toward her or said anything inappropriate, but because of the way she was reacting to him, the way her body seemed to be overriding every sensible thought in her head, the way she wanted to step closer instead of maintaining the safe distance between them. I should probably, Emma gestured vaguely toward the couch, toward the safe, neutral territory away from him. Jax nodded, turning back to his motorcycle like it was the most natural thing in the world to have a strange girl dripping on his garage floor. But as Emma moved toward the couch as she perched on the edge with the damp towel clutched in her hands, she caught the way his jaw tightened, the way his knuckles went white around the wrench. He wasn't as unaffected as he pretended to be, wasn't as calm and controlled as his body language suggested. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Inside, in the warm yellow light of the garage, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and leather and danger, Emma sat on a stranger's couch and wondered what she'd gotten herself into, and why, despite every warning bell ringing in her head, she didn't want to leave. Time moved differently in the garage. Emma lost track of how long she'd been there. The rain continued its relentless assault, creating white noise that made the space feel isolated, cut off from the world. Jax worked on the motorcycle with focused intensity. Emma watched from the couch, pretending not to watch, her eyes constantly drawn back. There was something almost meditative about the way he worked. His forearms flexed as he adjusted something, tendons standing out under tattooed skin. The ink formed elaborate patterns, skulls, tribal designs, script she couldn't read from this distance, all flowing together into something oddly beautiful. "You can ask," he said without looking up, startling her. "I can feel you staring." Heat flooded Emma's face. "I wasn't." "Yeah, you were." Still not looking at her, but there was amusement in his voice. "Everyone does. The patches, the ink. You're wondering what I am, what I do, whether you should be scared." Emma bit her lip. "Should I?" He paused, finally looked at her. Really looked at her. "Probably," he said honestly, "but not because I'd hurt you." The implication hung in the air. Not because I'd hurt you, but because of what's happening between us. Emma's mouth went dry. She should say something, break the tension, redirect the conversation to safe territory. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How long have you been with them? The Hells Angels?" Jax's expression closed slightly, became more guarded. He turned back to the motorcycle. 12 years. Since I was 23. That's a long time. It's everything. Simple statement. Absolute conviction. It's not something you do part-time, it's who you are. Emma processed this, trying to square the dangerous reputation she knew about with the man in front of her, who'd made sure she had a towel, who'd told her to call someone, who worked on his motorcycle with almost artistic precision. And before that? Before that doesn't matter. His tone made it clear the topic was closed. He set down the wrench and wiped his hands again on the already greasy rag, then moved toward the mini fridge. "You want water? Something to drink?" "Water would be good, thank you." He pulled out 2 bottles, crossed the space between them, and handed her one. His fingers brushed hers during the exchange. Rough skin, warm despite the cold bottle, calloused from years of hard work. And Emma felt the contact like an electric shock, sharp and sudden, traveling up her arm and straight to her chest. Jax felt it too. She saw it in the way his hand hesitated for a fraction of a second, in the way his pupils dilated slightly, in the sharp intake of breath he tried to hide. He stepped back quickly, putting distance between them again, but the damage was done. The awareness was there now, acknowledged even if unspoken. Emma twisted open the bottle with shaking hands and took a long drink, grateful for something to do, something to focus on besides the way her skin still tingled where they'd touched. "What about you?" Jax asked, leaning against the tool bench, arms crossed over his chest in what Emma was beginning to recognize as his default defensive position. What's your story? Dental office girl who goes exploring in bad neighborhoods? I'm not. Emma stopped, laughed weakly. Okay, yeah. I guess that is my story. Very boring. Very predictable. Why? Direct again, cutting through her self-deprecation. Why do you stay if you hate it? I never said I hate it. Didn't have to. It's all over your face. He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You've got that look. The trapped look. Like you're living someone else's life. Emma's chest tightened. How did he see that? How could a stranger, someone she'd known for less than an hour, see the thing she'd been hiding from everyone, including herself? That's not. Yeah, it is. Not unkind, just certain. I've seen it before. People who end up in places they never planned to be, living lives they never wanted just because it seemed like the right thing to do. The safe thing. And what's wrong with safe? Emma heard the defensiveness in her voice. Couldn't quite suppress it. Jack shrugged. Nothing, if it's what you actually want. But if you're just hiding. He didn't finish the thought, pushed off from the tool bench, and moved back toward the motorcycle, creating distance again, giving her space. But his words hung in the air, uncomfortably accurate. Hiding. That's exactly what she'd been doing. Hiding in routine, in expectations, in the comfortable confines of a life that looked good from the outside, but felt like suffocation on the inside. Even today's walk had been a tiny rebellion, a small attempt to feel something beyond the numbness. How old are you? Jax asked, changing the subject, giving her an escape route from the uncomfortable truth he'd exposed. 26. He nodded slowly. Young. You're not that much older. 35. But I'm older in ways that matter. He picked up a different tool, something with a long handle and a curved end, and bent over the engine again. I've lived enough for 3 lifetimes. Done things. He stopped himself, shook his head. Different worlds. Tell me, Emma heard herself say. Where did that come from? What was she doing? But suddenly she wanted to know. Wanted to understand this man who'd let her into his space, who saw too much, who made her feel more awake than she'd felt in years. Why? He glanced at her. Suspicious but also curious. Why do you want to know? Because. Emma struggled for words, for honesty that matched his. Because I've never met anyone like you. Because you scare me and I don't want to leave. Because nothing about this makes sense and I want it to. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and maybe too much. Jax straightened slowly, tool forgotten in his hand, his full attention on her now. The air in the garage shifted, became charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Emma, the way he said her name, low and rough, sent shivers down her spine despite the warmth. You need to understand something. I'm not one of the good guys. I'm not some misunderstood rebel with a heart of gold. The life I live, the things I've done, the club I belong to, it's real, it's dangerous. And girls like you. He stopped, jaw working like he was fighting with himself over what to say next. Girls like me, what? Emma stood up from the couch, not sure why, just knowing she needed to be on her feet, needed to face whatever he was about to say head on. Girls like you don't belong in this world. He said it with finality like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. You should finish your water, wait for the rain to stop and go back to your safe life. Forget you were ever here. What if I don't want to? The words came out before Emma could stop them, before she could think about what she was really asking. Jax's control cracked. Just for a second, but Emma saw it, saw the raw hunger flash across his face, saw the way his hands clenched around the tool he was holding, saw the war happening behind his eyes, want versus responsibility, desire versus the rules of his world. Don't, he said quietly, and it sounded like a plea. Don't do this. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you want me to cross this line? Like you want to know what it would feel like? He set down the tool with deliberate care, like he didn't trust himself with it in his hands. Because I do. Want to know? Want to find out if you taste as good as you look? If you'd make those sounds I'm imagining when I touched you? If. He cut himself off, dragged a hand over his face. Fuck. Emma's heart was racing, her whole body alive with awareness. She should be scared, should be backing toward the door, making excuses, running back out into the rain. Instead, she took a step toward him. Just one. Small. Testing. Emma. Warning and wanting mixed together in her name. Don't. Tell me why, she said, taking another step. They were maybe 6 feet apart now, close enough that she could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the pulse beating in his neck, the way his hands were fisted at his sides like he was physically restraining himself. Tell me why I should leave. Give me a real reason. Because I'm dangerous. To me? To the life you have. To the person you think you are. He shook his head, but he wasn't moving away. I'm not some guy you date. I'm not someone you bring home to meet your parents. I don't care, Emma interrupted, and realized with startling clarity that she meant it. I don't care about any of that. I care that for the first time in years, I feel something. I care that you look at me like you actually see me. Not the receptionist, not the good girl, not the person everyone expects me to be. You see me. Yeah, Jax admitted roughly. I do. That's the problem. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to make them both jump, to break the moment for just a second. When Emma refocused, Jax had moved closer. Not deliberately, maybe, but suddenly there were only 4 feet between them instead of 6. The air felt electric, charged with more than just the storm. What do you see? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who's been pretending for so long she forgot what real feels like. His eyes locked onto hers, dark and intense and unflinching. Someone who's scared of wanting more, of taking up space, of being anything other than what people expect. Someone who wandered into the rain today hoping something would happen, something that would shake up her perfect, suffocating life. Emma's breath caught. It was too accurate, too precise, like he'd reached into her chest and read her heart directly. And what do you want? She asked. Jax's jaw tightened. Things I can't have. Things that would ruin you. What if I want to be ruined? The words hung between them, impossible to take back. Emma couldn't believe she'd said them, couldn't believe the person saying them was her. But God, it felt good, felt true, felt like the first honest thing she'd said in years. Jax made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a growl. His control was fraying. Emma could see it in every line of his body, in the way his hands kept clenching and releasing, in the rapid, shallow rhythm of his breathing. You don't know what you're asking, he said, but he'd moved closer again, 3 feet now, close enough that Emma could smell him. Leather and motor oil and something uniquely him, something that made her dizzy, made her want to close the remaining distance and find out what would happen if she did. Then show me, Emma challenged. For a long moment they just stood there, the tension between them thick enough to taste. The rain pounded overhead, the fluorescent lights hummed, the smell of gasoline and grease surrounded them, and Emma felt more alive than she'd ever felt sitting in her climate-controlled office answering phones and filing paperwork. Emma, her name again, rough and desperate. Last chance. Walk away. Go back to your safe life. Forget this happened. No, Emma said simply. Something in Jax broke. Emma saw the exact moment his control shattered, saw the decision form in his eyes, saw him give in to whatever had been building between them since the moment she'd stumbled through his garage door. He moved. Fast. Covering the remaining distance in 2 long strides, his hand coming up to cup the back of her neck, his other hand gripping her hip, pulling her against him with barely restrained force. Emma gasped at the contact, at the solid heat of his body pressed against hers, at the way his fingers tangled in her damp hair. Last chance, he said again, his face inches from hers, his breath warm against her lips. Emma answered by grabbing the front of his vest and pulling him down to meet her. The kiss was nothing like Emma had imagined. He kissed with absolute focus and no hesitation. His hand tightened in her hair, angling her head exactly where he wanted it, deepening the kiss until Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His other hand pulled her flush against him, and she could feel every hard line of his body. Emma made a sound, half gasp, half moan, and Jax swallowed it, his tongue exploring her mouth with devastating precision. He tasted like coffee and something darker. Something dangerous. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Jax's eyes were black with desire. You're killing me, he groaned. Good, Emma whispered. Fair's fair. He looked at her with such raw hunger that Emma felt it in her core. You have no idea what you've started. So tell me. Emma's hands moved to his chest, feeling his racing heart. Show me. Jax's control was hanging by a thread. The couch, he said roughly. Now. The hours that followed blurred together. Heated touches, whispered demands, the sound of rain hammering overhead mixing with their gasps and moans. Jax took his time, learned every inch of her, showed her things she'd never experienced. He was demanding but attentive, rough but careful, and Emma surrendered completely to sensation, to the overwhelming intensity of finally being with someone who saw her, wanted her, made her feel alive. When they finally collapsed together, tangled and satisfied, Emma felt transformed. No longer the girl who'd run in from the rain, but someone new, someone who'd chosen want over safety, intensity over comfort. The night had fallen completely by the time Emma and Jax finally collapsed on the old couch, tangled together in a sweaty, satisfied heap. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright suddenly, too exposing, and Jax had reached up to flip them off, leaving only the glow from a small work lamp in the corner casting shadows across the garage. Emma was tucked against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat gradually returning to normal. His arm was wrapped around her shoulders, his fingers idly tracing patterns on her bare arm, raising goosebumps despite the warmth. Her yellow dress was somewhere on the floor, probably ruined. She couldn't bring herself to care. "You okay?" Jax asked quietly, his voice rougher than usual, scratchy from exertion and the sounds he'd made when he finally let himself go, when he'd stopped holding back and taken what he needed from her. "Better than okay," Emma answered honestly. Her body felt used in the best possible way, sore in places she hadn't known could be sore, marked in ways that would be visible tomorrow. The thought made her blush and thrill in equal measure, completely and thoroughly satisfied in a way she'd never experienced before. Jax huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "Yeah, that was—" He stopped, like he couldn't find adequate words. His fingers tightened on her shoulder slightly, possessive even now. "Didn't expect that when I woke up this morning." "Me neither." Emma tilted her head to look up at him, at his profile in the dim light, the strong line of his jaw, the slight curve of his lips, the way his dark hair was completely wrecked from her hands. "I was just going to walk around, maybe grab coffee, go home and watch Netflix. Instead, you ended up here." He looked down at her, and even in the low light she could see the conflict in his eyes. Satisfaction and worry, in equal measure. "With me." "With you," Emma confirmed. "No regrets." "You say that now." Jax's jaw tightened. "But tomorrow when you're back in your real life, when this seems like—" "Stop," Emma interrupted, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat against her palm. "Don't do that. Don't decide for me what I'm going to feel or think or regret. I'm an adult. I made a choice. A choice that could complicate your life in ways you don't understand." He sat up slightly, dislodging her, his expression serious now. Concerned. "Emma, I meant what I said earlier. My life, my world. It's not safe. It's not simple. And if anyone from the club knew about this, about you, would they care?" Emma asked, pulling the blanket that had been draped over the couch around her shoulders, suddenly feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. Jax was silent for a long moment. "They'd have opinions," he finally said carefully. "About me getting involved with someone outside, about potential complications, potential weaknesses. The club, it's family, but it's also business, and everything is calculated based on loyalty and risk." Emma processed this, trying to understand the complexity of the world she'd stumbled into. "And I'm a risk." "You're—" Jax stopped, rubbed a hand over his face. "You're unexpected. You're not part of this life. And that makes you vulnerable, which makes me vulnerable, which makes the club." He shook his head. "It's complicated." "So what are you saying?" Emma asked, hearing the defensive edge in her voice, hating it but unable to suppress it. "This was a one-time thing? The rain stopped so I leave and we pretend this never happened? That would be smart," Jax said, but his arm pulled her closer even as he said it, contradiction in every line of his body. "That would be the safe thing for both of us." "I don't want safe," Emma said fiercely. "I've had safe my whole life. Safe is suffocating. Safe is dying a little bit every day and pretending it's fine because you're comfortable." Jax looked at her for a long moment, something that might have been understanding or admiration or both crossing his face. "You say that now, but—" "Stop telling me what I'll think later," Emma snapped, pulling away from him, clutching the blanket tighter. "Stop assuming you know me, know what I can handle, know what I want. You don't get to decide that." "You're right," Jax said quietly. "I don't. But I can tell you the reality, and you can decide if it's worth it. You can decide if a few hours in a garage with a guy you barely know is worth potentially upending your entire life." "Tell me then," Emma challenged. "Tell me the reality. Don't protect me or sugarcoat it. Just tell me the truth. Jack stood up, pulled on his jeans, his back to her as he spoke. Even in the dim light, Emma could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched as he fastened the button. The truth is that my life is dangerous. I've done things I can't tell you about, things that would change how you look at me. The club requires absolute loyalty, and that sometimes means making choices that go against everything society says is right. I've been to prison. I've got enemies, real enemies who would hurt anyone connected to me just to send a message. I don't have a steady job in the way you understand it. I live by a code that probably makes no sense to someone like you. He turned to face her, his expression guarded. The truth is that if you walk out that door, you should keep walking. Block my number if I give it to you, forget you were ever here. Go back to your safe life and find some nice guy who works an office job and wants 2.5 kids and a house in the suburbs. And if I don't want that? Emma asked softly. Then you're either crazy or brave, and I can't decide which. Jax ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in multiple directions. Emma, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'm trying to give you an out before this gets more complicated. What if I don't want an out? Emma stood up, still wrapped in the blanket, and crossed the space between them. What if I want to see where this goes? Even if it's complicated, even if it's messy. Why? Jax asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. Why would you want that? You could have anyone. You could have Easy. Because Easy is boring, Emma said simply. Because in the last few hours I've felt more alive than I have in years. Because you see me, really see me, and you don't try to make me into something smaller or safer or more manageable. Because when you touch me, she stopped, felt heat rise in her cheeks, but pushed forward anyway. When you touch me, I don't have to pretend to be anything other than exactly who I am. Jax's expression softened slightly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. You barely know me. So let me know you, Emma countered. Unless you don't want to. Unless this really was just a one-time thing for you and I'm reading way more into it than I should. It's not that. Jax's thumb stroked across her cheekbone, his eyes searching hers. Fuck, Emma. If anything I want. He stopped himself, shook his head. I want things I shouldn't want. Want to see you again. Want to know what you look like in the morning. Want to find out if this, he gestured between them, if this is just chemistry or something more. But wanting something doesn't make it smart, doesn't make it right. Let me decide what's right for me, Emma said firmly. Give me your number. Let me make my own choices about whether the risk is worth it. They stood there, inches apart, the garage silent except for their breathing and the gentle patter of rain that had started again, softer now, almost peaceful. Emma could see the war happening behind Jax's eyes, could see him trying to do what he thought was the noble thing, the protective thing, even as every line of his body strained toward her. One condition, he finally said. You don't tell anyone about this. About me, about the club, about any of it. If anyone asks where you were tonight, you make up a story. You were at a friend's house, you were at a coffee shop, whatever. But you don't mention me or this garage. Protecting yourself or protecting me? Emma asked. Both, Jax admitted. Mostly you. The less people know about any connection between us, the safer you are. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. Jax studied her face for a long moment, like he was memorizing her features, like he was trying to decide if he believed her. Then he reached into his back pocket, pulled out a phone, not a smartphone, Emma noticed, but an older flip phone, and rattled off a number. Memorize it. Don't save it under my name. Don't text unless you're sure no one can see your phone. Emma repeated the number back to him, committing it to memory, understanding the significance of what he was trusting her with. In his world, information was currency and vulnerability, and he was giving her both. When can I see you again? She asked. I don't know. Honest, but clearly frustrated by the uncertainty. The club, I've got obligations, runs to make, meetings to attend, things I can't blow off or reschedule. So I just wait? Emma tried to keep the disappointment from her voice, mostly failed. Yeah. Jax pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers. I know it's not ideal. I know it's asking a lot. But that's the reality of this life. I can't do regular date nights and checking in twice a day and meeting your friends for brunch. I don't have friends to brunch with anyway, Emma admitted with a weak laugh. Why not? Jax asked, genuinely curious. Emma shrugged, the blanket slipping slightly. Same reason I was walking alone in the rain. Same reason I ended up here. I've spent so long being the person everyone expected me to be that I forgot how to be a person people actually want to be around. My friends from high school are all married with kids now, and I don't fit into that world. The people at work are nice, but we don't have anything in common beyond complaints about insurance companies and difficult patients. She stopped, surprised by her own honesty. I'm lonely. Have been for a long time. Jax's arms tightened around her, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Yeah, I get that. You can be surrounded by people, by brothers who die for you, and still feel completely alone because nobody really knows you. Nobody sees past the patch, the reputation, the role you play. You see me? Emma said quietly. You see me too, Jax countered. Or at least you're trying to. Most people take one look at the vest and the ink and they've already decided who I am, what I am. They don't ask questions, don't want to know the person underneath. I want to know, Emma said firmly. I want to know everything. The good, the bad, the complicated. All of it. Jax kissed her then, soft and deep, and it felt different from before. Less desperate, less driven by immediate physical need, more like a promise or an acknowledgement. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. I'll call you, he said. Might be a few days, might be a week, but I'll call. Okay. Emma trusted him, which was probably foolish after knowing him for just a few hours, but she did. Trusted that he would call. Trusted that this wasn't just empty words or a way to let her down easy. They stood there for a while longer, neither wanting to be the first to pull away, both knowing that the night was ending, that reality was going to intrude soon. Finally, Emma stepped back, let the blanket fall, and started gathering her clothes from where they'd been scattered across the garage floor. Her dress was damp but wearable. Her underwear was. She blushed, remembering where Jax had tossed them, how little care either of them had given to practical things like clothing in the heat of the moment. She dressed quickly, suddenly shy under Jax's watchful gaze, very aware that she probably looked like exactly what she was. Thoroughly ravished, well-used, marked in ways that makeup wouldn't completely hide. You need a ride home? Jax asked, pulling his t-shirt back on, running his fingers through his hair in a futile attempt to tame it. I can call an Uber. At least let me wait with you until it shows up. Not a question, just a statement of intent. Protective even now, even as they were saying goodbye. Emma nodded, pulled out her phone, surprised to see it was nearly 10 p.m., surprised that so much time had passed, that the world had kept turning while they'd been lost in each other. She ordered the ride, watched the little car icon on the map start moving toward them. Emma, Jax's voice made her look up. He was standing close again, his hand coming up to touch her face one more time. What happened here tonight? I know, Emma interrupted gently. I know it was intense. I know it was fast. I know it doesn't make logical sense. But I don't regret it. Won't regret it, even if you never call. Even if this is all there ever is. I'll call, Jax promised. Might not be as soon as either of us would like, but I will. The Uber notification pinged, 2 minutes away. They walked to the front of the garage together, Jax rolling the door up higher, revealing the wet street beyond, the rain-soaked neighborhood, the ordinary world that seemed surreal after everything that had happened in this space. A pair of headlights appeared at the end of the block, moving slowly through the puddles. Emma's ride. The end of whatever this had been. Be safe, Jax said quietly. Going home, going to work, just be aware of your surroundings. Don't tell anyone about tonight, about this place, about me. I won't, Emma promised. You be safe too. He huffed out something that might have been a laugh. Always am. The car pulled up and Emma recognized her driver's face from the app photo. She turned back to Jax one more time, rose up on her toes, and kissed him, quick and soft and full of things she didn't have words for yet. Then she pulled away, walked to the car, climbed in. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emma looked back through the rear window. Jax stood in the garage doorway, backlit by the yellow light, watching her leave. Their eyes met one last time, and Emma saw everything she was feeling reflected back at her. Want and worry and something that might become more if they were brave enough, foolish enough to let it. Then the car turned a corner and he was gone, and Emma was left with her racing heart, her tender body and her phone clutched in her hand with a number memorized that connected her to a man she barely knew and couldn't stop thinking about. The driver asked if she'd had a good evening. Emma looked at her reflection in the car window. Mussed hair, swollen lips, eyes bright with lingering adrenaline, and smiled. "Yeah," she said softly. "Yeah, I did." She'd walked into that garage soaking wet and lost, running from a life that didn't fit, looking for something she couldn't name. She was leaving with a phone number, marks on her skin that would fade but that she'd remember, and the absolute certainty that everything had changed. The rain picked up again as the car merged onto the highway toward her apartment, toward her regular life, toward the morning that would come too soon. But Emma didn't mind the rain anymore. Would never mind it again, probably, because now it would always remind her of this night, of stepping out of one life and into the possibility of another. Her phone sat heavy in her palm, and even though she knew she couldn't text him, couldn't reach out first, she opened her contacts and added the number he'd given her. Not under his name, she remembered his warning, but under something that would mean nothing to anyone else who might see it. Storm, she typed. A reminder, a promise, a hope. Outside the car window, Riverside passed by in the rain-blurred darkness. Ordinary streets, ordinary lives, ordinary people going about ordinary evenings. Emma watched it all and felt separate from it, changed by what had happened in a garage that smelled of motor oil and leather, changed by a man who saw her when she'd been invisible for so long, changed by her own courage in choosing want over safety, intensity over comfort. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if Jax would really call, if this could be anything more than one incredible night, if she was brave enough to navigate the dangerous world he'd warned her about. But she knew she wanted to try. Knew that even if it all fell apart, even if it ended badly, she'd had these hours of feeling alive, of being seen, of letting herself want without apology. The car pulled up to her apartment building, rain still falling steadily, and Emma thanked the driver, tipped generously through the app, and made her way inside. Up the stairs to her second-floor unit, key in the lock, door opening on a life that looked exactly the same as when she'd left it that afternoon, but felt completely different. Emma stood in her living room, still damp, still smelling faintly of garage and motor oil and him, and let herself feel everything. The soreness in her muscles, the tenderness between her legs, the slight ache where he'd marked her neck, the rapid beat of her heart that hadn't quite returned to normal. She'd hidden from the rain in a Hells Angels garage, and the way he'd looked at her had said everything. Had said, "I see you," had said, "I want you," had said, "This is dangerous, but maybe worth it," had said, "We're both lonely and broken, and maybe we can be lonely and broken together." Emma walked to her bedroom, stripped off her damp clothes, stood under a hot shower that sluiced away the physical evidence of the night but couldn't touch the emotional imprint. She dried off, wrapped herself in a soft robe, and finally checked her face in the mirror. She looked different, felt different. The girl who'd left for a walk that afternoon had been lost, suffocating, desperate for something she couldn't name. The woman looking back at her now had found it, or at least found the possibility of it, and there was no going back to not knowing what it felt like to be truly alive. Her phone buzzed once and Emma's heart leaped, but it was just a notification from work. The schedule for next week, mundane and ordinary, and so far removed from her current reality that it felt almost absurd. She looked at it, at the neat grid of hours and responsibilities and the comfortable, predictable life it represented, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped by it, because now she had a secret, now she had a possibility, now she had a number saved under Storm and the promise that he would call, and suddenly her ordinary life was just the surface, just the thing she did while she waited for the next time she could feel that alive, that seen, that completely herself. Emma climbed into bed, her body exhausted but her mind still racing, and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Riverside, washing the streets clean, feeding the grass, filling the storm drains, doing all the ordinary things rain did. But for Emma, rain would never be ordinary again. She'd hidden from a storm and found a different kind of tempest, one made of dark eyes and rough hands, and the kind of intensity that changed everything. And as sleep finally claimed her, Emma's last conscious thought was simple and true and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I can't wait for him to call.